Well, let's see. So this is probably the most significant announcement of the day is that we're excited to announce that we're going to be building a gigafactory in Mexico.
So the next generation platform is not one vehicle. It is multiple, and it's on a segment.
As autonomy is effectively turned on for the fleet, it probably will be the biggest asset value increase in history overnight.
And as we move towards the next generation platform, I think the term you used, Lars, is copy-paste. So to get it right from the first time, certainly there will be things that we learn and we replicate and we make adjustments to, but try to have as much standardization and commonization as possible, which allows us to go as quickly as possible with expansion. Even
small changes in the price have a big effect on demand, very big. Overwhelmingly, the desire for people to own a Tesla is extremely high. The limiting factor is their ability to pay for a Tesla, not do they want a Tesla. It's easy for people in this room to lose sight of that. If your income is far in excess of what a car costs, then you look at value for money, but you do not consider affordability. But for the vast majority of people, it is affordability driven. And I mean, I think really all cars will go to fully electric and autonomous. And so riding a non-autonomous gasoline car is going to be analogous to riding a horse and using a flip phone.
But that whole process resulted in a linear process that you see on the screen. We designed first, then we engineered, and then we figured out how to manufacture it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. When we were designing the car together, we didn't even know where we were going to build it. And so we came up with...
I didn't even know Lars when we were designing.
That's true. So once we got Fremont, we were very fortunate, and we figured out the manufacturing solutions sort of like we were flying a plane and putting the wings and building the engine at the same time. So we knew we had to do better.
Yeah, we knew we had to be better in order to scale. Approached the process a little bit differently than the first time around. Now we had teams that we all worked together, so we were able to combine design, engineering, and manufacturing process all at the same time. But somewhere along the way, we changed the manufacturing process to be fully automated. And so we leaned into this whole new way of manufacturing a car, but we had already engineered it. So things didn't quite go as well as planned.
It was an amazing product, but it landed us in production hell. Many of us who lived through that carry those battle scars. It was a great idea, but it wasn't the right timing. Like Franz said, automating something that we designed to be built manually is super hard. And we have many, many failed examples of that at the Fremont factory that we ripped out.
And with Cybertruck, we designed a vehicle around a vision that actually started with the manufacturing process. And in this case, the materials dictated the design.
Forming full hard stainless steel isn't rocket science, but it sure isn't easy. And it limited the way we could do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It really forced us to think about designing something in a way that you couldn't normally stamp panels. You couldn't form them in a traditional way. So you ended up with very linear bending processes that are just not in automotive kind of language of manufacturing today. But it actually created a very efficient process and one of the most dynamic designs ever, I believe. It's definitely something that's going to change the road landscape.
After all that, we would design, engineer, manufacture, and plan for automation happening together. It gives us the opportunity to question requirements. This is something that is fundamentally only available at Tesla. In the places I used to work and the top manufacturing companies in the world, they don't sit together.
Yeah,
we are one team.
Nowhere I know has all these teams together thinking about these processes from the very beginning.
In fact, all of those engineering teams, manufacturing, design, automation, they're all in one org. They all report to one person. We can't point fingers at each other, so we have to solve them together, which is the best way to innovate. Henry Ford first invented this assembly line in 1922. It's been 100 years, and it's really hard to make a change after 100 years. And when you watch it happen, it's actually really silly to a guy like me. You take all these stamp panels, you put them together, then you put them in a framing station, you build a body that looks something like a car, you put the doors on, and then you paint them. Once you get the color, you take the doors off, And then you start putting the interior inside the car. It comes in through the openings that already exist. I wish it went in like this big piece like this, but there's actually people coming in and out of the car. There's awkward movements. Then we lift the car up. We put stuff from underneath it. We put it down. Then we put the seats in the car. And finally, we close it all out with glass, and we bring those doors that went away for a trip, and we put them back in the car. Most of the time, we're doing this with a big, giant car and moving it and doing really nothing to it at all.
What's funny, though, in this kind of whole process is that just recently Toyota just called this an engineering work of art.
True. But at Tesla, it's not good enough. If we're going to scale the way we want to do, we have to rethink manufacturing again. As part of the master plan, we have to make another step change in cost. We started this on Model Y when we made these huge gigacastings, and we deleted hundreds of parts. We simplified assembly with the Model Y structural battery, where we decided the floor should be a part of the car. The battery is the floor. We put the seats and the interior on the battery, and we bring it up through a big open hole, and we assemble it. And this allowed us to do things in parallel, fully rethinking the process and reducing the final assembly line by about 10%. And we thought, maybe we could do this other places. So when you think about what I'm trying to say, I really want to hammer this home. When you have a car that's about 5 meters long, and you have people working around it like we did in Model 3, and we change that to this process where we take different parts of the car, and we can do more at the same time, like we did with the Model Y structural battery pack. What you see here is us doing that on the front part of the vehicle, or the rear part of the vehicle. That means we can get more people working on the car, or robots, working on it at the same time. That means we have better operator density, less time doing nothing. I call that space-time efficiency. It has nothing to do with quantum mechanics. We can have that conversation later. But we get 44% more operator density, which means more work, less time walking back to the station, 30% improvement in space-time efficiency. And because we're not building it in and out of the car with those slow movements of those robots I showed you from production hell, when we go to automate it, it's going to be a lot easier. In the end, that will probably look something like this, where we balance parallel and series manufacturing in a way where we only do things that are necessary, with a much shorter final line, blocking a lot less of the entire rest of the factory, so we can optimize material flow using the best practices. And what that means, it's going to look something like this, where we build all the sides of the cars independently, we only paint what we need to, and then we assemble the parts of the car once and only once. We put them where they need to go. The interior is attached from a bottom-up or a top-down strategy, so there's more access for those robots and people. We aren't moving heavy objects around and doing nothing to it, and it means we're doing more work on the car more of the time. And then when we take all of these tested sub-assemblies and we put them together, we finally assemble the car only one time, putting the sides on with all of their parts to a front and rear that was already assembled, carrying the floor in with the seats, and finally boxing it out with the doors one time, just like Cybertruck. So in the end, you get the same car, but it's not going to be a Model Y.
Yeah, this is not. Yeah. This is a Model Y for illustration, not the next-gen vehicle. I think our track record proves that we can deliver the best cars, and we deliver the best cars in spite of, because of these constraints. And I'd love to really show you what I mean and unveil the next-gen car. But you're going to have to trust me on that until a later date.
And the other thing that you probably all know about our powertrains is that they're efficient. Our cars go 25 to 30% further than other EVs in our class for the same amount of efficiency. But at Tesla, efficiency means more than just reducing how much energy the cars use. It's about how we develop, how we manufacture, how we refine, and how we scale the powertrain. Now, the Model 3 and Y powertrain is a great example of this broader meaning of efficiency. So since we launched it back in 2017, we've continuously improved that powertrain and the factory that builds it. So the drive unit, the engine of the car, is 20% lighter for the same power. We use 25% less heavy rare earths than when we started. And the powertrain factory, which is behind me today, is 75% smaller and 65% cheaper. How did we do that? We did it by designing the entire vehicle and the entire factory together as one company. And this sets Tesla apart. So in addition to the work that we've done in software and hardware, we've also done a lot of work in-house on software. So this is the drive unit for Model 3 and Y, and if we take a cross-section, we see the stator and the rotor, and they're responsible for the core function of the drive unit, which is converting electricity into motion. And our custom software lets us simulate the rotating magnetic field that is responsible for that conversion. And getting that simulation exactly right, it's central to the cost, the weight, the size, and even the sound of the drive unit. And now, you can buy software that will do all of this, but our tools are faster, and they're more accurate, and that was not easy to do. And that allows us to quickly iterate through millions of possible drive unit designs to find the best one. So when you are making a new product, it's not enough to think about the product itself. You have to think about how you're going to make it at scale. So at Tesla, our powertrain and our powertrain manufacturing equipment is both designed under one roof. The engineers who are designing the motor, they are in the same room as the engineers who are designing the machine that's going to put that motor together. And that collaboration pushes us from day one to design products that are not only high performance, but are really easy to assemble. So, all of this expertise that we have in the powertrain team, in hardware, in software, in manufacturing, it's going to have a major impact on our next platform. In our next powertrain, so those silicon carbide transistors that I mentioned that are key component but expensive, we figured out a way to use 75% less without compromising the performance or the efficiency of the car. And of course, we know that battery cell supply is one of the constraints on the scalability of EVs right now. Our new powertrain is compatible with any battery chemistry. And that will give us great flexibility in battery sourcing. If we want to make EVs more accessible to people, they have to be cheaper. We've reduced the drive unit cost to about $1,000. And we don't think any other automaker is even close to that number. Finally, the bigger a factory is, the longer it takes to build. If we can build the same number of cars from a smaller factory, we are going to be able to scale EV production faster. Our next powertrain factory is 50% smaller than the one that's behind me today, even though it has the same capacity. All of these improvements, I think, are going to be transformative for the adoption of EVs and our ability to scale them.
In 2022, we completed the transition from lead-acid batteries to lithium-ion batteries, and which use a new toolless connector. We expect lithium-ion batteries to last for the life of the car, so don't expect anyone to wake up to a dead battery ever again. This eliminates a major source of failures for our car. And the toolless connector makes it easier to service the car, and it also includes a software feature to allow validation that the connector has been properly installed at the end of a service event, which removes another source of failures in our cars. At Tesla, we're always trying to improve every single component in the car, and a nice example of that is the 15-inch display that was originally shipped in the 2017 Model 3. Over time, the cost of the display has gone down 24%. We've been able to reduce the weight by 12%, and we've reduced the power by 33%. At the same time, we've increased the brightness of the display by 50% and improved the color accuracy. So this is one of our favorite things at Tesla, is to make a component cheaper and better. At Tesla, the drive to improve efficiency in the car is never ending. I think of it as like peeling a carrot. You just take a swipe at it, a little bit falls off, doesn't really make much of a difference. But if you just keep at it, over time it accumulates into a pretty significant improvement. One of the changes that we're looking to make right now is to change something that's been steady for the last 60 years, 12 volts. 12 volts has been, as I said, for 60 years. The demand for power in the car has been steadily increasing to the point where we now have to have pretty large wires to drive over 200 amps of current around the car, which increases the mass and cost. With Cybertruck and all future Tesla platforms, we will be moving to 48 volts. This reduces the current needed by a factor of 4. And since power loss in the harness is resistance times the square of the current, a 4x reduction in current leads to a 16x reduction in lost power while distributing energy in the car. That allows for smaller wires, smaller E-fuses, and smaller controllers. It also allows us to make those heat sinks smaller, or in many cases, remove it completely, all benefiting the car in terms of mass and weight. 48 volts is the future for low voltage design at Tesla, and likely the rest of the industry in due course.
As another example, we are able to use our collision data to design our crash safety systems for what happens in the real world, far beyond what regulatory and consumer ratings tests prescribe. And then furthermore, we're able to use that data to recreate in simulation all of those crashes every single time we make a change to the vehicle's design, or to the software that controls the airbags and other restraint systems. Here, on this graph, the gray dots that show up first are specific crash tests that are prescribed by regulatory and consumer ratings agencies throughout the whole world. And the rest of the color that fills in around and on top of it, those represent the crashes that we've seen happen in the real world. Those are what we design for and what we test to. Every day, 123 million miles driven, 1.9 million charge sessions, and those rates are only increasing as we deliver more and more cars into the world. As another example, we've analyzed patterns in the way the fleet drives and charges to optimally size battery packs for our next generations of vehicles. For example, we recently released a feature in Model S and X that automatically, predictively, adjusts and raises the suspension for ride comfort before the car hits a section of rough road. We do that by leveraging the fleet to generate a map of road roughness everywhere our cars drive. Sounds pretty simple, but requires coordination of software across a number of different components inside and outside of the car. We took a page from the software playbook, which says, test early and test often. And we applied that mantra to every single car that we build at every step of the assembly line. So now, when a production associate plugs something into the car, the central car computer sees that connection, confirms that it's the correct part for the type of car that's supposed to be built, installs a software update if necessary, checks configurations and calibrations, and runs a barrage of tests on that thing and all the other things that are connected to it. And if it finds an anomaly that can't be fixed purely with software, it throws an alert immediately that is displayed prominently on the vehicle's display, as well as sent to back-end command and control systems, so that a human can come over and fix the problem before the rest of the car gets built on top of it. And when customers bring their car into service, when they receive a Tesla-owned service loaner vehicle, we are starting at some locations to automatically add that vehicle to the customer's mobile app account, so that combined with cloud-synchronized profiles and phone key, it's a completely seamless experience. As soon as the customer walks up to that loaner, it behaves and feels exactly like their own car. And that has been a whirlwind tour through some of the things that we're doing behind the scenes to enable the efficiency, cost reduction, and speed that we are going to need for our next phase of growth and for the next phase of the master plan.
These neural networks take in the live feed from the car in real time of the 8 cameras in the car and produce a single unified 3D output space. The second big piece of this puzzle is the data. This is where Tesla has a unique advantage because it can tap into the fleet to access the exact data that can fix the problems. But raw data is not sufficient. In order to train these networks, you need labeled data. You need labels to supervise the networks. And if you only depended on the human labelers, this data would be too tiny to train these large multi-camera video modules. We need lots and lots of data to train these networks. Hence, we have built a sophisticated auto-labeling pipeline that collects data from the fleet, runs computational algorithms in our data center, and then produces the labels to train these networks. Here, you are seeing a 3D reconstruction that is happening by collecting various clips from different cars in the fleet and assembling them, all of them together, into a single unified representation of the world around the car. You can see all the lanes, the road boundaries, curb, crosswalks, even the text on the road being accurately reconstructed by these algorithms.
Most engineers think about the vehicle as a complete, consolidated, fully contained system. But in the software team, we think about the system as including the vehicle as well as all of our back-end server-side applications and infrastructure and the resultant feedback loop from the entire fleet that informs all the decisions we make as an engineering team.